The PS2 is one of the best-selling consoles of all time, and with good reason. Sony's legendary console is home to some gaming greats that still hold up to this day, which is why today I'm going to talk about some of the best PS2 games to play. Our first introduction to Kratos has held up very well over time, and feels especially good now that the series has moved on from its original Greek mythology theme. Small is not a word in the vocabulary of this classic brawler. Absolutely everything is dialed up to 11, from the detail of the scenery and dramatic musical score to the size of the bosses and of course the level of violence on display. Kratos will pluck the wings from smaller enemies and plunge the blades of chaos deep into larger foes, often as part of some wonderfully choreographed QTE sequences. Let's move away from fancy words and get down to some hell-raising monster-slaying action. God of War 2 is the next title in our list of the best PS2 games. It's the second in the series but the sixth in the God of War timeline. If you're not one to get bogged down with the where and the when and just like to play a good game, however, then you can't go wrong with this epic entry into the series. Fans of Greek mythology will be all over this game. You play as Kratos, the new god of war. He's killed Ares, been sent to hell by Zeus, and then rescued by Gaia. It's a good job I listened to Stephen Fry's Mythos recently, otherwise I'd be clueless. Using Athena's blades, Kratos must fight his way back to Zeus, conquering beasts, demons, and time itself along the way. While Bluepoint Games did an incredible job with their remake of Shadow of the Colossus, the original still stands as a gorgeous classic that displays what excellent production looks like. The game often makes the list of the top 10 greatest games of all time, and for good reason. Shadow of the Colossus has everything: a unique, evergreen plot, marvelous and engaging gameplay, unparalleled world building, and a sense of wonder and mystery that nothing else provided at the time. As a whole, Shadow of the Colossus is a title that has aged well and stands as a testament to what made the PlayStation 2 such an amazing console. Beyond Good and Evil is a third-person action-adventure game that whisks you away to a planet under attack by aliens known as DMZ. Playing as Jade, you're forced to fight back against the creatures as they try to take over the planet, and the story simply evolves from there. Paired with delightful characters and solid storytelling, Beyond Good and Evil might not look as great now as it did back when it launched, but is still packed with appeal. A fair few of the games in this list released in the early noughties, and have been privy to upwards of 3 installments since Resident Evil 4, Silent Hill 2, God of War, and so forth. Beyond Good and Evil sequel has had fans waiting over a decade. However, having been in development since 2008, this makes it the most delayed AAA game of all time. Will this sequel ever see the light of day? Who knows? What a game to end our list of the best PS2 games of all time. Yes, the number one spot deservedly goes to Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, one of the best stealth adventure games I have ever played. If you're an eagle-eyed reader, then you'll know that I used to be pretty terrible at stealth games. Everything changed in Snake Eater, however. Something clicked, and I instantly became a tactical machine. I reckon I could have applied for the S.A.S. after completing this game, but writing seemed like a much safer profession. In true PlayStation fashion, this title takes place before all of the other games in the Metal Gear series and is set in 1964. You play as Naked Snake, a character that may not have as cool a name as Solid Snake, but certainly has all of the fighting spurt and stealthy kill moves, if that's even a thing. Ditching the urban city streets for a Soviet jungle theme with hints of that GoldenEye level where you have to dodge Xenia with her AC-90, MGS-3 sees you taking on a mission to destroy a super weapon while saving a rocket scientist. Talk about a hard day at work! This game is a masterpiece and one of the pioneering games of the stealth/action genre. Everything about it, from the graphics to the trademark humor, make it a must-have for any PS2 fan. The Grand Theft Auto series has entertained people with its comedic stories and boundary-pushing ideas for some time now, and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was a high point in this long-standing series. A huge sandbox, a memorable protagonist, and some missions that still stick in the minds of players even this long after. No game touches on hard subjects and can go back and forth between humor and hard emotions quite like GTA San Andreas does. '90s LA is all well and good, but if you really want the best GTA experience, you need to head to the 80s in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Vice City meets Miami Vice in a game with incredible music and gameplay that's completely lawless. That's the vibe we're going for here. I spent hours just milling around this city taking in the scenery. I wouldn't be surprised to see Nikki Sixx on a motorbike in multiple places throughout the game too. If you loved Grand Theft Auto 3, then Vice City ramps up everything tenfold. More action, more debauchery, more everything. It went on to sell a whopping 10.25 million copies, surpassing the massive success of its predecessor. If that doesn't give it a Retro Dodo badge of approval, then I don't know what will. Vice City is without a doubt the best GTA game on the PS2 and still a crowing jewel in the series. It might not be GTA 5, but it's pretty damn close. After a good showing with its first release of Virtua Fighter 4, Sega's updated version smoothed out the graphics, added a couple of extra fighters, and topped it off with substantial single-player content. The result was one of the best fighting games of its time, whether you were beating your friends down or facing off against foes in the virtual arcades of Quest mode, based on real-life pro players. This series has a reputation for being impenetrable, but that's not really justified. It's very simple to learn, with just 3 main buttons and one of the best tutorial modes of its time. Bully takes the 34th spot in this list of the best PS2 games of time. This open-world GTA-style free-for-all is a cracking title and another that needs to be in your collection. The jury was definitely out as to whether punters would like Bully. Violence and risque content looked set to hamper sales, though 1.5 million people flocked to buy it. Can't have been that bad then, eh? Players control James Hopkins, known through the game as Jimmy. He's unwillingly been sent to Bulworth Academy for a year, and he's on a one-boy mission to stop bullying. He goes about this by beating people up, completing missions, and rising to the top of the school popularity system. Sounds a bit like bullying with missions to me, but who am I to judge? This is a great game for all those people who wished Harry Potter would lay the smackdown a little more instead of getting Hermione to fight all his battles for him. She's the real kick-ass character in those books. Players move around this massive game on bikes, go-karts, and skateboards while working their way to the top of the Bulworth social ladder. It's a great title and one that will go down in history as one of the best PS2 games of all time. Resident Evil 4 brought new life and a few changes to the well-beloved series. While the new mechanics made sure it wasn't the same old thing, the classic horror feel and a recognizable protagonist made for a warm welcome for longtime fans. There were some wacky and funny moments, and the gray and creepy tones and interesting take on zombies made for a game that still holds a high-ranking spot in horror games and the Resident Evil series as a whole, an experience that has certainly stood the test of time. Guitar Hero 3: Legends of Rock is one of those games that is impossible to put down. Not because it's tough, well, it is, or that you want to complete it in one go, which you will, but because you feel like an absolute rock legend while playing it. The premise is simple. Press one of 5 colored buttons in time to the rhythm of the music. Sounds simple enough, especially if you can already play guitar, right? I've played guitar since I was 10 years old and I still found this game tricky. Achieving that full rock factor was always a challenge, and although I can play most of these songs in real life, my fingers always fell over each other trying to get a high score. There's something very comforting about the PS2's only major Dragon Quest game. As befitting a game from the quintessential Japanese RPG series, it remains an expression of the core of the genre, and it was a perfect introduction for European players who got this as their first official game in the series. It's a simple game, and even by the standards of the series, it has a straightforward plot. But there's a value in being brilliant at the basics, and this game nails that in every aspect, from Akira Toriyama's attractive cel-shaded character designs to the top-notch localization. If you've always fancied downhill racing but don't like the thought of falling off and face-planting the dirt, then Downhill Domination should be high up on your wish list. This racing game is epic. There's no other word for it. I've always wanted to be one of the riders that make those massive jumps and speed through courses without any fear. And here, when I take shortcuts and ultimately crash into stuff or other people, I don't feel a thing. All of the courses have multiple routes, so you can take a different track every time you play. And whenever you win, players take case to buy better bikes or moves to help other riders on their way. The multiplayer mode on this game was always so tense. My mates and I would constantly be on the edge of our seats as the world rushed past our helmets. Play through the career mode, take part in time trials to hone your knowledge of the courses, or just go for a free ride and pull off some sweet air. If you wanted your racing games on the more realistic side, Gran Turismo 4 was way ahead of the rest of the console pack in its day. Polyphony Digital didn't try to do anything particularly new or clever with the game and focused on improving the things that had made the series so popular to begin with. With over 700 cars and more than 50 tracks to race on, Gran Turismo 4 is a game of truly mammoth proportions and one that looked absolutely phenomenal. The new B-Spec Racing Management mode was a fine addition to the on-track action too. It's time for our first RPG title. Persona 4 is the 5th title in the Persona series, despite the confusing 4 on the front cover. Like Bully, it follows a year in the life of a high school student, though murder and mystery are the main features this time. Set in a sleepy old town with nothing going on, our city boy main character must discover why dead bodies are appearing through the town while delving into the mysterious TV world. Okay, that isn't my definition of a town with nothing going on. Corpses on rooftops, rumors of soulmates emerging from television sets, and shadow monsters that can only be fought by entering your screen. I don't know about you, but I find this all pretty scary stuff. One of the key elements of Persona 4 is the weather forecast system. Foggy days mark times that game events happen, giving players time to prepare for the unexpected, if that's even possible. The main character and the members of your RPG party all wield personas. These are like a cross between Pokemon and patron uses, mythical creatures that protect their owners and battle for them in the field as they struggle through life. Everyone may be waiting on the next installment of the series, but at least we all have fond memories of the original Half-Life from the PS2 era. Gordon Freeman may be a silent protagonist, but maybe the shock of an invasion of Earth beginning at his research facility has scared him quiet. It's such a fun look into science fiction and early FPS gameplay. While we are all still curious about where the story will end, it is still fun to go and look at where it all began, so just keep an eye out for the G-Man, as trouble always seems to follow him. Def Jam. Fight for New York sees players proving their worth in gang fights through New York. It's definitely got a darker undertone to it than a stylized fighter like Mortal Kombat, but it's one of the best brawlers for the console too. Especially when you consider the soundtrack too. We're talking Henry Rollins, Flava Flav, and Busta Rhymes heading straight into your ears. I guess you could say that this game has a modern Streets of Rage feel to it, with touches of Mortal Kombat where players can use the environment around them to their advantage. Everything is up for grabs, from speakers to soda cans and pool cues. There are multiple ways to hurt your enemies in this game, and nothing is off the table. Whether you choose to focus on street fighting, martial arts, or wrestling moves is up to you. There are 5 styles in total, and anything goes on the streets. Work through the story mode or just head into a battle with 4 players to see who has the best skills. You've got to give Neversoft credit. Given how popular its skateboarding series was, it would have been easy to simply put out another formulaic entry. Instead, the team took a gamble and pushed the series in a bold new direction, creating one of the best sports games on PS2 by incorporating a more free-roaming style of play and a substantial story element that hadn't existed in previous games. While the game was clearly at its best when you were on your board, the ability to walk around and pick up challenges on the fly refreshed a series that was potentially in danger of becoming a little bit stale. The PS2 had some great hack and slash titles in its repertoire, but perhaps none as exciting as Devil May Cry 3, Dante's Awakening. If you have followed the series or played the original Devil May Cry game, then this 3rd installment is set before the events of the first game. With me so far? You follow Dante, but a younger version of the character that many of you will know and love. The story follows the turbulent relationship he has with his brother, Virgil, and is jam-packed full of demon-slashing goodness to keep you occupied for hours on end. Sly Cooper and the Thieves Raccoonus is what kicked off the Sly series, but it's when Sly 2, Band of Thieves released, that players began to hail it as an all-time great. The family-friendly stealth game expands on the first game by introducing more characters, and even making some of Sly's game playable during particular missions. These new playable characters have their own unique skills for you to learn and apply while exploring the various, wildly interesting worlds that Sly Cooper 2 has to offer. In Sly Cooper 2, you also get to try your hand at pickpocketing, which is a personal favorite pastime in video games anyway. Stealthily approach goons to empty their pockets of loot, and retreat back to your safe house with the gang to turn a profit from it. Soul Calibur 2 is not only one of the best PS2 games of all time, but it's one of the best fighting games of all time, period. If I'm being honest, I first got into Soul Calibur 2 back on the GameCube when Nintendo announced Link was joining the fight. I'm a humongous Zelda nerd and couldn't wait to battle up close and personal using the Master Sword. Since then, I've bought all of the games to get the other bonus fighters, and I truthfully don't know which one I prefer the most. For those not in the know, the PS2 version of Soul Calibur 2 came with Tekken legend Heihachi Mishima. GameCube gamers finally had the chance to use Link in epic battles, and Xbox users held the power of Spawn in their hands. Players battle a series of characters in the story mode, unlocking new weapons and costumes as they go. Each character has a soul edge weapon that causes devastating damage but also drains health at the same time. Nightmare and Astaroth are the two best characters for bludgeoning everything in sight. There's Ivy with her whip and Voldo with his strange claws, along with a host of other unlockable characters to find while playing through the game. If you still have friends to play couch co-op with, then Soul Calibur 2 is an amazing title to kick back with on a Saturday afternoon while tucking into a pizza. The levels are great, the weapons are gnarly, and there aren't a ton of complicated moves to remember. Smashing the beloved characters of Disney together with one of the most popular Japanese RPG series was bound to create some sort of fandom explosion, and it did just that. Kingdom Hearts still has very passionate fans today. Of course, there's no instant answer to how such a crossover should play, so Square did what it knew best and came up with this brilliantly presented and overall rather excellent action RPG. It's a delight to see Mickey and Donald visiting worlds like Agrabah and Halloween Town, as well as interacting with the likes of Tidus and Cloud from Final Fantasy. If we're going to start throwing the phrase dynamic duo around, then we can't go any further without including Ratchet and Clank up your arsenal. The developers must have undoubtedly had a great time naming this game, and I certainly had a blast replaying it over and over again until I could play the levels with my eyes closed. All of the iconic characters from the first Ratchet and Clank series return for a piece of the action, and we're also introduced to Dr. Nefarious, a new robotic villain and the game's antagonist. Ratchet and Clank marked a move towards a growing trend of shooting games as opposed to the typical platform games of old. It still has some brain-tickling elements, but it's mainly about big weapons and blasting enemies. And don't forget the online multiplayer. This is one of the first games that I went online with back in the day. The servers have long since closed down, but there's plenty of life left in this game without them. Just being able to climb into a vehicle and drive it around is worth the second-hand sales price alone. Silent Hill 2 is a cornerstone of the horror game genre that brought you back to the titular town, and not for a relaxing vacation. Mourning the death of his wife, James Sunderland is surprised to receive a letter from her asking him to go back to Silent Hill. You don't have to know much of the series to know it's far from being that simple. Monsters of all types, creepy settings, and sheer isolation await James in this game, which helps to build the foundation of the series as a heavyweight of horror. Jak 3 has to be my second favorite Jak and Daxter title for the PS2, which means there's another coming further down this list for you to enjoy. Another open-world game, Jak 3 brings all of the features that gamers love about the dynamic duo to a brand new adventure brimming with crazy weapons and exciting items. Missions make up the majority of this game, with specific challenges requiring completion in order to progress. Racing, gunning down enemies, and solving brain teasers are the keys to success, accompanied all by the while by Daxter's trademark humor. Fatal Frame has 5 entries in its series that have spanned multiple generations of consoles, with the second entry, Crimson Butterfly, being the most popular of the series. It took everything that made the first entry great and elevated it to new heights, raising the bar of the entire franchise. Fatal Frame 2, as such, has withstood the test of time. The trials Mio and Mayu endure are still as haunting as ever, and the ghosts are still just as capable of delivering scares now as they were back during the time of their debut. After a good showing with its first release of Virtua Fighter 4, Sega's updated version smoothed out the graphics, added a couple of extra fighters and topped it off with substantial single-player content. The result was one of the best fighting games of its time, whether you were beating your friends down or facing off against foes in the virtual arcades of Quest mode, based on real-life pro players. This series has a reputation for being impenetrable, but that's not really justified. It's very simple to learn, with just 3 main buttons and one of the best tutorial modes of its time. Instead of bringing a whole hose of characters to the fray like the other games in the series, Mortal Kombat, Shaolin Monks concentrates on just 2. This isn't just side-on battle after battle either, it's got a story to it, with the Shaolin Monks Kung Lao and Liu Kang fighting enemies in order to save the Earth. And yes, you already know there's going to be a co-op mode to play through alongside a friend, right? Mortal Kombat is synonymous with fatalities, ruthless ways of killing enemies. In Shaolin Monks, however, there are even more ways to dispatch with bad guys. Enter mutalities and brutalities, killing more than one enemy at a time, and brutal attacks that are even worse than fatalities. There's something very comforting about the PS2's only major Dragon Quest game. As befitting a game from the quintessential Japanese RPG series, it remains an expression of the core of the genre, and it was a perfect introduction for European players who got this as their first official game in the series. It's a simple game, and even by the standards of the series, it has a straightforward plot. But there's a value in being brilliant at the basics, and this game nails that in every aspect, from Akira Toriyama's attractive cel-shaded character designs to the top-notch localization. At number 5 in our list of the best PS2 games is a vibrant adventure that fans of Spyro and Banjo-Kazooie will love, Jak and Daxter. The precursor legacy follows Jak and his friend Daxter, the latter of which happens to get transformed into a cross between an otter and a weasel when he comes into contact with some dark magic. That's an odd sell, for anyone who is wondering. Jak doesn't talk, but Daxter more than makes up for it with his comedic ramblings throughout the game. They have to seek a dark sage to try and turn Daxter back into a human again, but as you might have guessed, that is easier said than done. The worlds in this game are one of the main reasons why I love it so much. I still think about the lurker guards from time to time and exploring these exciting levels. It has that comedic value of Conker's Bad Fur Day without any of the NSFW content, and critics the world over loved it for its perfectly crafted storyline and the strong bond shared by our dynamic duo. Tekken 5 is considered by many to be the pinnacle of the franchise. The game kickstarted the modern era of Tekken games. It features fluid, snappy combat that still feels good today. The textures and graphics are incredible and still do not feel dated, and the game has a big roster of new and returning characters. The good story was just the cherry on top. Perhaps the best compliment here will be that Tekken 5 is a game that modern audiences can put on and lose tons of hours on. Despite it being a PlayStation 2 title, it has all the makings of a great fighting game. The 50th title on our best PS2 games list goes to Max Payne, one of the very first PC games I ever played. These articles are filled with useless facts about my life like that, but it all helps with the word count. I much preferred Max Payne on the PS2. It played smoother, the controls were easier to figure out, and the whole experience just felt supercharged. Oh, and if you've seen the movie, then don't worry, the game is actually good. After his family is murdered along with his friend, Max is branded a criminal and goes on the run. Both goodies and baddies are trying to kill him, and he's basically a wild mess with a gun who has nothing to lose. The game obviously has a GoldenEye/Mission Impossible style feel to it, for those of you who only see games as N64 copies, and somehow the makers got away with stealing bullet time from The Matrix. Who cares about legalities though? The story, weapons, and levels are fantastic, as is the film noir theme running throughout. Considered by many to be among the most influential FPS games of all time, Black impressed almost everyone with its unmatched gameplay, audio work, and destruction system. This was the first game where players could destroy almost everything, and it was all really realistic for the time. Beyond its gameplay were the graphics. Black had realistic textures for the time, and the good use of motion blur really set it apart from its competitors. As a whole, Black looked like a game that pushed the boundaries of the hardware of the PlayStation 2. To this day, this game stands out as an epic FPS adventure that almost every gamer is bound to have a good time playing. So, did you like the games I recommended? So leave your like, subscribe to the channel to follow me, and activate the bell because I post a lot of videos on this channel and you can't miss it. I would like to remind you that in the description we have a list of different products that can make your gaming experience much better. If you want to buy, the link will be in the description. Anyway, thank you very much for following me this far, and until next time, bye.